Elise and welcome back to My Cupcake Addiction. Today I'm going to be showing you how to do a really cool and really simple melted chocolate bar illusion on kind of a classic looking birthday cake. Let's get started. To make your cake, I'm using a double batch of my perfectly pipeable buttercream frosting, and I've tinted mine pink and flavoured it with strawberry, but you can use any colour or flavour you like. I've also got some sponge cakes, so I've got 4 1-inch high by 7-inch round sponge cakes. We're going to make quite a tall cake today. I've got a plastic ruler, an offset spatula and a serrated edge knife. I've got some compound chocolate, so this is chocolate that doesn't contain cocoa butter. I've also got some Hershey's bars. You could use something like Lindt here, but make sure it's a nice thin chocolate bar because you don't want them to be too large or they're going to be too heavy to stand up on top of the cake. I've got some sprinkles. I'm using some little round confetti sequins, some whipping cream with a 35% milk fat, a couple of Ziploc bags and a pair of scissors. I also have a little bit of baking paper and a cake board, and you'll need some kind of a tray just to set your chocolate bar on. So the first thing you want to do here is you want to get all of your cakes level and about the same height. So pick your shortest or your smallest layer and you just want to trim the top off so that it's nice and flat and level. Then you want to use that as your guide for all of your other layers so that they're all about the same width and about the same thickness. You can use a cake leveler here or you can just do it by eye. Using your offset spatula, just smear down a bit of buttercream, and that's kind of going to glue your bottom layer to the board so your cake doesn't move around. And then you want to put down another layer of frosting, making sure that it protrudes over the edges of your layer of sponge. On goes the next layer of sponge and a little bit more buttercream frosting until you've layered all 4 of your layers of cake. You want to take some of that buttercream frosting now, and we're going to do a crumb coat, so really smear it sort of into those grooves between the cake layers and make sure that you're working the spatula back and forward to get that frosting right into any cracks, creases and crevices on your cake. Put a little bit on top. You should have a fair amount of frosting here, so now you want to scrape it back so what you've got is a really thin crumb coat. You can see cake coming through it, that's totally fine. Once you've got that relatively smooth and all scraped back, pop it off into the freezer for 15 minutes and we're going to let the crumb coat set. Melt down your compound chocolate or your chocolate melts, and I've put my Hershey's onto a baking tray lined with that baking paper, and then I'm just using the chocolate to kind of get right up nice and close to the edges. What you want to make here is like a long chocolate stick almost. This is going to go inside the cake. It's completely edible, but it's going to give stability to your chocolate bar. Break up your remaining Hershey's chocolate and then pour over your whipping cream, and I'm going to pop this into the microwave for 30-second intervals, stirring in between. It should only take about a minute. Your quantities for what is essentially a small batch of chocolate ganache, I'm going to leave in the description box below this video. As you stir it, you'll see that chocolate dissolves and you can see the thickness, so you don't want it to be too thin here. Around this consistency is perfect. Take your cake out of the freezer and it should be nice and firm and solid, and then you're going to put your nice pretty coat on top, and the idea is with that crumb coat you should end up with no crumbs in the top layer of your frosting. So put a really generous amount of that strawberry buttercream on all over the sides and all over the top, and then using your ruler, use that to scrape back the edges. What you'll get is a really nice smooth side, and then kind of like a cement layer, you just want to use the ruler to come across the top and just neaten off those edges. Near enough is good enough here because you're going to sort of edge the bottom using those confetti sprinkles or any sprinkles you like by just pressing them up against the side of the cake. Give your cake board a little bit of a tidy up, and then you want to pop it back in the fridge or the freezer for about 10 minutes just to start to crust on top so that it's not soft buttercream. Make sure here that your ganache is at room temperature. You don't want this to be hot or it's going to melt through the buttercream. So it's sort of a bit of a fine line in making sure that it's still melted and it hasn't started to get completely cold, but it's not still at all hot. I put about 3 or 4 tablespoons on top of my cake and then just use the offset spatula to really just gently smooth it evenly over the top so that it just starts to dribble over the edges, kind of like melting chocolate. Give it a couple of good hard taps on the bench and that'll sort of force those chocolate drizzles down the side a little bit, and then you can pull your Hershey's bar out of the fridge. Stick it up next to the cake so you can get a rough idea of how tall your cake has ended up, and I had to snap off about 1 inch or so from the bottom of mine, and then you can just take your chocolate stick essentially and shove that chocolate bar right down into the center of the cake. You want to apply an even pressure here because you definitely don't want to break your chocolate bar at this point. A little bit of the rest of that chocolate ganache goes into a Ziploc bag, and then you can snip off just a very small corner of the Ziploc bag, sort of making like a makeshift piping bag. And then you're just going to come up and around the join where the chocolate bar meets the cake, so that you've got ganache acting like the oozing meltingness, and the ganache on the chocolate bar matches the ganache on the top of the cake. That is it. That is a relatively simple to make, but really, really cool to look at birthday cake. You guys requested something fun, simple, and generic for a birthday, so I hope that I've managed to fill the criteria on this one. If you're not already subscribed to My Cupcake Addiction, make sure you do for 2 new videos every week. And as always, guys, thanks very much for tuning in.